too strong. Take out the wheels.
The Juggernaut turbo tank was one of the most impressive and intimidating land vehicles in galactic history. Few who see this beast of a machine ever forget it. I think most fans are familiar with this rolling fortress, but did you know that the Juggernaut is actually a whole family of vehicles? In this week's video, we will examine them all. I'm Joey from Radio Free Coruscant, and this is the Clone Turbo Tank. Design. 4 of the 5 Juggernauts all shared the same general shape. They had a large, boxy body with a smaller head-like section at one end, though whether this end was the front or the back was a topic of much debate among Juggernaut crews. They were propelled by 5 pairs of massive metal wheels and were bristling with weapons. All of the Juggernauts were built by Kuat drive yards, with the first model rolling off the assembly line near the beginning of the Clone Wars. HAVw A5 Juggernaut. The heavy assault vehicle, wheeled A5, was the first variant of the Juggernaut. Despite being plagued by mechanical issues and being rendered obsolete almost immediately by its successor, the A6, it was used by the Republic all the way through the Clone Wars and well into the Imperial era. It was more or less equivalent in size and armament to a wheeled AT-AT. It measured 21.8 meters long by about 9 meters wide and 10 meters tall. Its wheels were roughly 3.5 meters in diameter. It was allegedly capable of reaching 200 kilometers per hour or 124 miles per hour in a straight line, but when turning or on rough terrain, it had to reduce its speed to just 25 kilometers per hour or 15 miles per hour. This limitation and the severe difficulty of turning this bulky of a vehicle meant that instead of having to turn the vehicle around, the Kuat engineers just installed a second command center at the rear of the tank, whichever end that was. This meant that if the tank needed to travel back the way it had come, the front crew handed off control of the tank to the rear crew, who drove it as if it were facing forwards. It was equally capable when traveling in either direction. The tank was guided by a sentry who sat in a small pod atop a tower at one end of the tank, which is probably one of the least desirable jobs in the clone army. The A5 Juggernaut was well armed for its size. It carried 3 Mark 1EW heavy laser cannons, 1 Mark IIIW medium laser cannon or a double medium blaster cannon, and 2 Mark IIW concussion grenade launchers, which each carried 6 grenades. It was crewed by 2 pilots, 6 gunners, and a sentry, and could carry 50 troopers and 1 ton of cargo. All of this cost 200,000 credits. HAVt B5 Juggernaut. The A5 Juggernaut had an almost identical twin in the form of the heavy assault vehicle Transport B5. The B5 was the same size and shape as the A5, but the wider end of the tank had a loading ramp for vehicles and cargo instead of a second cockpit. I'm sure this fact was used by crews commanding the smaller sections of other Juggernauts to claim that their section was supposed to be the front. We don't know exactly how much cargo the B5 could carry, but it was significantly more than the A5. Its weapons were also slightly different. It still had the side-mounted anti-infantry cannons of the A5, but its roof-mounted weapons were converted to point defense cannons to take out enemy missiles and aircraft. HAVw A6 Juggernaut. The most famous Juggernaut variant is the HAVw A6. This monstrosity was bigger and better in almost every way. Most noticeably, it was over twice the length and 8 times the volume of the A5 at 49.4 meters long, 19.6 meters wide, and about 18 meters tall, including roughly 7-meter tall wheels. It was coated with a unique thermal superconducting armor that spread out the energy and heat from blaster bolts that struck it over the tank's entire surface. It had a high output reactor that provided power to its complex all-wheel drive system. Each of its wheels consisted of 3 independently powered discs, making it surprisingly maneuverable for a vehicle of its size. It was capable of reaching 160 km per hour or 99 miles per hour. The A6 also had the sentry tower seen on the A5, though this time it came in the form of a retractable cupola, which I have no doubt was even less comfortable than the tower the A5 sentry stood in. The A6 Juggernaut had a crew of 12 people. 2 pilots, an engineer, a vehicle commander, a navigator, a comms operator, 6 technicians, and 8 gunners. It had a passenger capacity of 300 troopers depending on the internal configuration, and a cargo capacity of 200 tons. It was not just a transport though, it was heavily armed as well. The A6 carried 2 anti-personnel cannons, 2 twin anti-personnel cannons, a heavy laser cannon turret, a rapid repeating rotary heavy laser cannon, and 2 retractable flex ordnance launchers. These were capable of firing dozens of missiles at once, overwhelming nearly any enemy point defense systems. Due to their immense size and the resources required to construct them, A6 Juggernauts were not seen nearly as commonly as simpler tanks like the ATTE, but they still saw action throughout almost the entirety of the Clone Wars and into the Imperial era as well. Despite being several times the size of the A5 Juggernaut, the A6 actually managed to cost 20,000 credits less than the smaller tank at 180,000 total. HAVw A9 Juggernaut. Near the end of the Clone Wars, Kuat drive yards decided that 2 sizes of Juggernaut was not enough for them, and so they designed a third model. This tank, the heavy cargo vehicle wheeled A9, split the difference in size between the A5 and A6. Official stats have not yet been revealed, but by my estimation it measured about 30 to 35 meters long, 12 meters wide, and 14 meters tall. Its front and rear wheels were about 4 meters tall, and its center wheels were 5 meters tall. Unlike its larger sibling, the A9 was primarily used as a troop transport rather than an assault vehicle. After the Clone Wars, it was also frequently used as a prisoner transport by the Empire, especially in labor camps. Whether it was carrying soldiers or enslaved prisoners, it could carry up to 125 passengers in certain configurations. We don't have an official number for the cargo capacity, but based on the passenger count between the A6 and A9, it was probably about 187 tons. In battle, it was crewed by 2 pilots, a vehicle commander, a comms operator, 4 technicians, and 4 gunners. However, when used as a prisoner transport, it only required 1 pilot, a co-pilot to operate the weapons and comms, and several guards. The A9 Juggernaut may have been smaller than the A6, but it was nearly equally well armed. It carried a turret-mounted rapid-fire rotary cannon, which could also be used as a point defense cannon, 2 twin heavy repeating blasters, a heavy laser cannon, and the same retractable missile launchers as the A6. We don't know its top speed, but it was likely comparable to the A5 and A6. We do know that it was highly maneuverable, perhaps the most maneuverable Juggernaut tank on the market. Continuing the confusing inverted price-to-size ratio of the A5 and A6, it cost 180,000 credits. HAVw A9.2 Juggernaut Transport. I don't know why the most radically different Juggernaut in the family has a name that implies it is a slightly modified version of the A9, but it's especially strange considering that it is barely a fraction of the size of the other models. By my estimation, the A9.2 is roughly 19 meters long, 6 meters wide, and 4 meters tall, with 2-meter tall tires. It had the same basic boxy shape and 5 pairs of wheels as the other Juggernauts, but its body consisted of 5 articulated sections that allowed it to take much sharper curves than other vehicles its size. It was used for hauling heavy or dangerous cargo. It was unarmed, but equipped with a horn to warn pedestrians to get out of its way. We don't know much more about it than this. One of the many things we don't know is the price. Logically speaking, compared to the A5 Juggernaut, I would probably estimate it to be 100,000 credits, since it's a bit smaller and has no weapons. However, since Juggernaut prices seem to increase the smaller the tank gets, it could be as much as 250,000 credits. On the other hand, if it cost this much, I think the Imperial Remnant on Morak would be a little more careful about protecting them from attacks by the locals. Behind the scenes. The Juggernaut gets its design from this piece of Empire Strikes Back concept art by Joe Johnston. While George Lucas ultimately decided to go with the AT-AT as the vehicle of the Empire, fans loved the concept design, and it was eventually used by authors and comic artists as another vehicle in the Empire's arsenal. This was known as the HAVw A5. When it appeared in Revenge of the Sith, however, it was scaled up to enormous size, and so it had to be given a new designation, which was the A6. You will note that the vehicle is referred to as the Clone Turbo Tank far more often than it is the Juggernaut, which is its proper name. This is allegedly because at the time Revenge of the Sith was released, the company Toy Biz owned the rights to the Juggernaut name as they produced Marvel action figures which included a character named Juggernaut. Hasbro, Lego, and other companies making toys for Star Wars were supposedly not allowed to use that name, as it would conflict with Toy Biz's license and potentially confuse customers. However, I don't know if that is actually true or just the speculation of an anonymous Wikipedia contributor. No source is cited for this particular anecdote, and it doesn't quite sound like how I would expect toy licensing to work. I'm not really sure how to research something like this, as it is a very niche subject, so if you have any more information on this, please let me know in the comments. And that's everything there is to know about the Juggernaut. Please leave a comment with your favorite version of this tank, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a video. Then I will see you next week. RFC